So who noticed a pattern with the verses we read? What book were they from? What chapter were they from? Anyone know what that's called? Beatitudes, right? And it's from a larger passage called the Sermon on the Mount. And coincidentally, and whenever I say coincidentally, know that there are never any coincidences in God's kingdom. Everything happens for a reason. So we are studying on Wednesday nights the Sermon on the Mount. So as I was preparing next Wednesday's lesson, Josh asked me to give a devotional on amends, and I'm like, I think I see some of the trends here in the second half of Matthew 5. And so I'm either being lazy or I'm being efficient. I like to think I'm being efficient because you're going to hear some of this. Please come back Wednesday if you're not coming Wednesday. Cody and I are going to teach on the same passage. But one of the things I learned, I took a trip to Israel in January, and one of the things they said was the Bible has what they call 70 faces, right? So it's like looking at a diamond, and if you look at it this way, if you look at it that way, if you look at it from top, you're going to get a different picture. So the Sermon on the Mount has at least 70 interpretations. And it's if you're prideful, it can break you down and show you that you can never measure up. If you're broken, it can say through God's strength, the potential you can be. And as the developers of Celebrate Recovery found out, if you're in recovery, this whole passage fits, and the whole passage is for you. So we're looking at amends, which is principle 6. Evaluate all my relationships, offer forgiveness to those who have hurt me, make amends for the harm I have done to others, except when to do so would harm them or others. And then step 8, we've made a list of all persons we have harmed and became willing to make amends to them all. So who has a good, who can tell me what does it mean to make amends? What does it mean to make amends with somebody?
Own up to what you did wrong and don't do
Change? Anybody else? Heal the relationship. Ready? Someone over here? Ask for forgiveness. Yeah. I think all those. Showing out or living your forgiveness. That's really good. Yeah. That's the key, and that's one of the things we're going to hit on this lesson. You've been reading ahead, or you've done this before. There's a quote by Ralph Waldo Emerson, and he said, sow a thought, you reap an action. Sow an act, you reap a habit. Sow a habit, you reap a character. Sow a character, and you reap a destiny. A lot of times we focus on our actions, good or bad, right? But in the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus takes that all the way back to the heart. And he takes it back to your thought life and your heart life. And he does that through the various lists of reasons. Come back next Wednesday and we'll talk about that a little bit more. Can someone read Matthew 5:21 through 24? All right, Jesus gave our lesson. That's it, right? That's all of it right there. When we are hurt people, right? We've heard that phrase. And when we've been hurt by someone, it's the hardest hurts to let go of are the ones that are the most justified. The ones that, hey, that person really did me wrong, and I'm mad, and I'm going to hold on to it. But then what does Jesus say, right? That's equivalent to and it's the same train of thought as murder. So in your handout, you've got this amends, and I've got a few of these. I'm not going to go in quite the same order. Is this on? Jonathan, you may need to advance me. Oh, I mean, just turn it on. How about that? There we go. So first be reconciled to your brother. So A is admit the hurt and the harm. So A is admit. And many times we cope with these hurts. And we think, I maybe, in my case, I should introduce myself. I'm Chris. I'm also a child of a very dysfunctional relationship, and that kind of manifests itself in anxiety and overeating, and saved by the grace of God. I'm a disciple of Christ. So hello, everyone. So holding on to these hurts really blocks our recovery, and it blocks our relationships with God. And so this is why when Jesus says, leave your gift at the altar and go take care of business and then come see me, the altar turns out to be this place of reconciliation. And so there's this theme there, and we don't have an altar like you see in the picture like they had in Old Testament times where they would offer an animal on it, but it's the same kind of thought. We call this the altar because this is where we come and we get reconciled to God. So holding on to these hurts gives us this we feel like, and especially, I don't know, Alyssa, if you feel the same way, but when your parent is being, not a nice person to you, holding on to that resentment can be the only form of control that we have. And it's like, I'm a little kid. I can't control what's going on, but I can control how angry I am, or I can control how sad I am, or anything like that. So this control is kind of, but it's not a real control, is it? We can't control anyone else. And so when we think about, can someone read 1 John 3:15? Somebody have that?
Anyone who hates a brother or sister is a murderer, and you know that no murderer has eternal life residing in him.
Right? We see where hatred leads. I mean, it's not in the world's consequences. It's not the same as actual murdering someone, but in God's economy, hating someone, it's murdering their reputation. It's murdering they're another child of God. They're another someone who's made in God's image that you are denigrating. And so when we're holding on to this is I think why Jesus is drawing this reference. The next verse is 1 John. We read 1 John 1:9 all the time. Let's pick up with verse 6. 1 John 1:6 through 9. Yeah. All unrighteousness. And we read that verse all the time, 1 John 1:9, but I think it's important to pick up the light versus darkness and the hate and all that. So we're letting this go, and it can be nothing except a good thing. So God tells us it's a good thing, yet what do a lot of us do, right? We hold on to the anger and hold on to the hate. So again, A is admit the hurt and the harm. Oops. No way. Showing right. The M is make a list. Sorry, that's not showing up for some reason. Should be right in between there. On the back of your handout, we've got a little extra today. So you've got the notes here, but on the back there's a place to make a list. And there's two columns. I owe amends to on the left, and I need to forgive on the right. And so as I mentioned, the altar is a place of reconciliation. And there are people, depending on our background, there are people who have hurt us and we didn't deserve it, and there are people we have hurt and they didn't deserve it. And so when we think about making amends, we have to first go through this process of identifying who we have hurt. And we really need God's wisdom and enlightenment to say, hey, maybe there's someone I don't even realize that I hurt, but God will bring something to your mind that will remind you. And so as I said, holding on to hurts blocks our relationships with God. We talk about making a fearless inventory because it's kind of scary doing this. It's kind of scary thinking, I've got to go fess up to this person that I've wronged, and maybe it's been years, or maybe it's been longer, and why bring all this up? What good is it going to do? But there's a process to it. We may also think, how can I forgive them? How can I forgive them? You don't know what they've done to me, or you don't know what I've done to that person. How can I expect them to forgive me? And so that's the whole point of the altar. The altar is all about reconciliation. And so when Jesus says, if you're remembering your offering at the altar, and there you remember your brother has something against you, go make that peace first. Start that reconciliation process. So on the back of your handout, there's that list to begin making the list. We're going to skip the E, because that actually, I think, fits better in the next passage we're going to read. The N is not for them. I don't know why these aren't showing up, because they're on my list here. N is not for them. And Luke 6:35, but love your enemies, do good, lend, expect nothing in return. And that's the big thing about this. When we're talking about not for them, we're not doing it to get anything in return. Someone mentioned that earlier when we talked about making amends. So we approach them sincerely and humbly. And we're not trying to justify our actions. We're not trying to make excuses. We're just being open and honest and saying, hey, I messed up, and I shouldn't have done that. I'm sorry. We aren't seeking a reward for what we're doing. We're not expecting a pat on the back. We're not expecting anything, but we're expecting freedom to come out of this. But with that said, we don't ever just want to I don't want to take my problem and dump it on someone else. So the next letter is D, which is do it. There it is. Do it at the right time. So I'm going to read Ecclesiastes 3, verse 1. If you're old enough like me, you remember a song from 60s and 70s. There is a season, right? Turn. So there's a time to do this. We don't just be a bull, like they're saying, a bull in a china shop. We have to be sensitive. Again, we're not trying to make our problem someone else's problem. We're not just say, hey, I wronged you, but I'm sorry. Here you go. I'm done, right? And so what if they're not ready to hear it? And so you have to be sensitive to those things. Ask the Spirit for guidance on this, and it's all about going to God in prayer and saying, "Hey, all of this is going to be a prayer process. We're going to ask God to reveal those who we've hurt and who have hurt us, who should be on our list, who should not be on our list. Ask God for how to approach it, the wisdom and the tact to go up and seek out this forgiveness." And I would say there may be people where we have that phrase where you might hurt them, when seeking forgiveness would cause harm to someone else, then maybe it's not the right time. Don't let your own self be the arbiter on that. Talk to your sponsor about that, because there may be times where you're just acting out of fear, and no, you really do need to go talk to that person. So that is D, do it at the right time. Could someone now read Matthew 5, 43 through 47? Pick up the last few here.
You have heard that it was said, love your neighbor and hate your enemy. But I tell you, love your enemies and pray for those who persecute you, that you may be children of your Father in heaven. He causes his sun to rise on evil and the good, and sends rain on the righteous and unrighteous. If you love those who love you, what reward will you get? Are not even the tax collectors doing that? And if you greet only your own people, what are you doing more than others? Do not even humans do that?
And this would have been such a hard teaching for them to hear, because probably surrounding where Jesus is giving this talk, there are Roman soldiers all around them who, they're enemies of each other, right? And so I'm supposed to love them and pray for them. Are you kidding me, right? Say that again? No, he means it. And that's where the E, we're going back to the E now. E is encourage one another. And so love your enemies. Jesus, many of you probably know the story of the Good Samaritan. So this person who thinks that he's kept the law comes to Jesus and say, what do I lack? And he says, love your neighbor And then, well, he asks, who is my neighbor? And then Jesus goes on to tell the story of the Good Samaritan. Well, the Jewish people and the Samaritans were bitter enemies. And so Jesus tells the story of this, probably a Jewish man is injured. He's beaten by bandits. Two fellow Jews come by and kind of step over him. This is a very narrow passageway he was talking about, so you couldn't just walk on the other side. You had to actually physically step over him. But no, this Samaritan comes up and takes care of him. Says, hey, whatever he needs, I'll pay for it. Put it on my account. Protects him, gives him lodging. And then Jesus asks, who was the neighbor, right? And it's the Samaritan. So you're supposed to love even your bitterest foe. And in our case, that would be even the people who hurt us the worst are still made in God's image. Now, they may not be acting it out, but they're still, originally, their original design is to be made in God's image. And so that's where we are approaching them from. Hebrews 10:24. Let's consider how to encourage one another in love and good deeds. So just as the original crowd, I'm imagining, said, I can't love them. They're different. They hate me. How can I love them? We have to, in the same way, making amends is really difficult. And the fact that you're all here, and if you're going through step study, you're going to be willing to make this inventory and be willing to make amends. It takes a lot of courage, and it takes a lot of strength. And we'll find out later it's not in our strength, it's his strength. So we're all around to encourage you on this. Your sponsor, your accountability partner, friends, leaders around here, don't feel like you have to do this alone. Now, the forgiveness will be a one-on-one conversation, but getting you there and building you up and coming around you and surrounding you with support, we're all here for that. So we're here to encourage each other. And then S is start living the promise of recovery. And as Josh said, it's really what I think of the Sermon on the Mount is it's this high, perfect standard. Jesus even says, be perfect. Well, it's like, I can't be perfect. I'm a sinner. But through his strength, I can be perfect. Making amends is really unnatural, right? We want to, and forgiveness is really, when you think about it, it's really unnatural. It's like, I want to hold on to my hurts because, I can control that like we talked about. But now you want me to go release and give that up. Philippians 4:13, I think a lot of us know, but can someone read starting with 4:11? Got it? Yeah, read those two verses ahead of it. So we know that last verse, but sometimes it helps to hear the context. Not that I speak from need, I have learned to be content in whatever circumstances I find myself in. Part of recovery is getting that godly contentment, getting that restoration back. Like we admit things, I am doing it, and what are the things I'm doing, whether it's substances I'm using or emotions I'm clinging to, are not helping. So I'm not content. And we're here because we want to learn that godly contentment. And then he talks about, I know how to get along with little, and I know how to get along with prosperity. So, life is up and down, right? We have good times and bad times. But we have this contentment that we have in Christ. And then he says, I can do all things through him who strengthens me. So I think that's the key for recovery, is like, we can't do this on our own. On my own, like Josh said, I mess things up. I make poor choices. And I get myself into trouble and I hurt people and all of that. But through him, we can be perfected. And so that's the message of the Sermon on the Mount in general. But also when it comes to making amends, I think we can be afraid if we're looking at it from our perspective. But if we bring him into it, this is what he wants. This is what he's asking. Before you come to me, go reconcile with your brother, and then we'll all have a relationship together. And ultimately, it's all about restoring relationships. So, just to recap, admit the hurt if you missed the fill-ins there. Admit the hurt and harm Make a list, encourage one another. N is not just for them. D is do it at the right time. And the S is start living out the promise of recovery. And so this is like, again, it's like we're going to teach a whole different angle of the Sermon on the Mount next week, but how it applies to recovery is really, really cool. So I'm going to pray right now and just continue on with the night. God, just thank you for this group. Thank you for these men and women, and I pray that you give us the willingness to evaluate our relationships, identify those whom we have hurt and those who have hurt us, and just show us the right way to make amends with them. Give us strength to forgive when we've been hurt, and give us courage to make things right when we've hurt others. And all of this, we just pray for your guidance, and we just want to live out not just the recovery part of our life, but every part of our life. We want to live that out in your strength. So please make your strength real to us and empower us. We ask all these things in Jesus' name.